On Friday night, a prominent true crime program hit the air with a one-word headline, bombshell. An investigative journalist during the segment reported that a person located south of Tucson was taken into custody. This individual was being held for questioning regarding the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, though notably, no arrest was confirmed. It represented fresh activity in a stagnant investigation that had previously seen detentions lead to dead ends. With views on X climbing into the tens of thousands, a community that had waited 76 days for a lead listened closely. The report alluded to various people who had been picked up and subsequently released without any formal charges being filed. Furthermore, none of the people mentioned in this broadcast have been officially designated as suspects by the police department. Most people remember exactly where they were when they heard that specific word. If you have tracked this investigation with the intensity of those currently watching, you are likely winding down from work. You were probably finishing up a few small tasks at the week's end when a clip appeared on your social feed. It was that viral segment which punctuated the air with an exclamation point and that singular, heavy word, bombshell. You stopped immediately because 76 days had passed without a single major break. The evidence so far was limited to a masked individual on a doorbell camera and demands for ransom paid in cryptocurrency. There were also photographs of a gray Range Rover being recovered and towed from a Culver's restaurant parking lot. Aside from that, the public only saw news conferences where a sheriff stood at a podium without announcing any arrests. Meanwhile, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie has been missing since February 1st, and the silence has been devastating for her family. Her daughter has spent weeks on national television programs pleading for her mother's safe return to their family home. So, on a Friday in April, Nancy Grace began her show with Dave Mack discussing a specific lead south of Tucson. The reporter spoke about a person detained for questioning, which immediately caught the attention of everyone following the Guthrie case. Correct me if I am wrong, but is that not the same area where a detention occurred weeks ago? The community focused in because the geography was undeniably familiar to those who have been watching the maps closely. South of Tucson is precisely where the Rio Rico detention took place back in the month of February. This was where a man named Carlos Palazuelos was stopped, taken into headquarters, and interrogated for several hours before being released. It was a complete shock. Truly. So, what is your next move from here? I am trying to clear my name because I did nothing. Days later, another operation began. This second police action occurred much closer to Nancy's residence in the Catalina foothills rather than the southern Tucson area. That scene involved a SWAT team and forensic units, plus that gray Range Rover towed from the nearby Culver's parking lot. 3 people were held during that raid, but once the investigation cleared, no charges were ever brought in the Guthrie disappearance. When Dave Mack specified a location south of Tucson on that Friday, he was referencing a very specific investigative path. He was steering the audience back toward a region that had already been searched without yielding a definitive suspect or arrest. The story was presented as a tip that had reached the newsroom rather than an official statement from the sheriff's office. It feels like we are revisiting the same territory as before, being led toward what could be a potential suspect. Mack did not provide the name of the individual in custody, nor did he mention which law enforcement agency was involved. There was no mugshot provided to the public, and no court docket had been filed. What he did provide was the one thing this community has craved for longer than most people care to admit. It was the mere suggestion of forward momentum, the idea that the established pattern of the investigation had finally been disrupted. The long stretches of silence from Pima County and the occasional one-line press releases had become the frustrating norm for months. The weekly reminders from the family that every detail matters were finally met with something that felt like actual news. Then, the broadcast did what television usually does. It transitioned to the next segment, and the show simply moved on. Nancy Grace and her team discussed other items on the rundown, the credits rolled, and then the internet took over the conversation. That was the mood heading into the night, as a single question began to dominate every social media feed simultaneously. People wondered if this was the specific development that had caused Savannah Guthrie to leave her broadcast on Wednesday. You likely remember that Wednesday clip where Savannah Guthrie sat on the Today Show set next to actress Anne Hathaway, She looked into the camera, teased the interview with the Mother Mary herself, and even mentioned The Devil Wears Prada. After the show cut to commercial, Savannah vanished from the set, leaving Hoda Kotb to fill her chair without explanation. Hoda, who was already covering for Craig Melvin while he was on vacation, took over the segment as if nothing had happened. Savannah only showed up again briefly at the very end of the show for a food-related segment alongside the other anchors. Neither the network nor Anne Hathaway offered any official statement regarding the switch. That single minute where Savannah Guthrie was missing became the footage that the internet played on a loop. The Daily Mail was the first to report on it, citing a source within NBC who claimed that the show had implemented a three-word. Savannah Guthrie was operating under a specific protocol. Reports indicated that if a significant development occurred during a live television segment, a producer would approach her and quietly state she was required off-set. Not a phone call, not a summons to the booth, but specifically that she was required off-set. 3 words. Insider sources informed the Daily Mail that the network would interrupt her mid-show if necessary. That specific phrasing to pull her mid-broadcast circulated through digital online threads for days. A different source, cited by the same publication, attempted to lower the temperature. That individual pointed out that anchors frequently transition between segments and handoff duties. Hoda Kotb filling in was framed as standard procedure, and the lack of a public explanation did not confirm a crisis. Both narratives were entered into the public record by late Wednesday evening. One version was clinical anchors hand off, co-anchors take over. The other was cinematic, a producer interrupts, the anchor vanishes. Given the nature of the case and its obsessive audience, the sensational version did not wait for verification before gaining momentum. By the time Dave Mack started his Friday night broadcast, viewers had already constructed a narrative that was ready to be utilized. Savannah had been removed from the Anne Hathaway segment on Wednesday. Something significant had transpired. A hair follicle was transferred to the Federal Bureau of Investigation on Thursday, a detail we will analyze later. By Friday evening, reports surfaced that a suspect was in custody. The connection from the Wednesday exit to the Friday arrest rumor was exactly what the internet desired, and so the connection was made. The flaw in this logic is that only Today producers and the Guthrie family knew the actual events of that Wednesday. Information regarding an NBC code was based on anonymous insiders, not legal filings or official records. The claim that she could leave mid-broadcast described an available protocol rather than a confirmed incident. No official source has verified that Wednesday's departure utilized a code word. The more reserved second source told the Daily Mail the opposite, that nothing out of the ordinary occurred. Savannah herself has remained silent on the matter. On Friday, the audience was effectively layering 2 unverified claims and treating the result as a fact. Wednesday might have been the code, and Friday might have been the arrest. Both could be true, but both could also be irrelevant. That distinction is more critical now than it has been in the last 12 months. For 78 days, a family has been desperate for any shred of data. For those same 78 days, the sheriff's office has operated under extreme scrutiny. The gap between a fleeting rumor and a legitimate arrest is the difference between family closure and continued trauma. 24 hours before the Mac broadcast, the case shifted. It happened with the quiet precision of forensic logistics rather than the theater of a press conference. Sources close to the probe told Fox News Digital, while ABC News confirmed that DNA evidence from the residence of Nancy Guthrie, including a hair sample, had reached the FBI. Investigators had bagged the sample weeks prior. A private laboratory in Florida had been conducting the primary testing. Just before that Thursday, those findings were transmitted to the FBI lab for secondary analysis. To grasp the importance, one must look at the evidentiary chain that began in early February. When Pima County deputies and federal agents entered the Catalina Foothills property on February 1st, the forensic recovery was extensive. Biological material, specifically blood, was identified on the front entryway and later verified as Nancy's. A glove was found 2 miles away from the home. Investigators noted its resemblance to the gloves worn by the intruder captured on the Nest security system. Fibers, hair, and various biological traces were sent for analysis. The glove yielded a specific genetic profile. That profile failed to match any entries in the FBI's DNA database, CODIS, nor did it match samples taken from inside the residence. Subsequent reports linked that glove to a local restaurant worker with no ties to the crime, effectively closing that lead. Other DNA recovered at the scene proved far more complex. The Pima County Sheriff's Department categorized the profile as a mixture of genetic material from 3 or more people. This complexity hindered traditional database searches. Deconvolution software, the computational tool used to isolate individual contributors from a combined sample, has functional boundaries. When a mixture is sufficiently tangled, even sophisticated deconvolution fails to isolate a clean profile for comparison. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has stated that a mixture of this specific density cannot be easily separated into distinct, searchable components. Separated from the bulk of the evidence, focus shifts to the hair, which remains distinct from the mixed samples. Reporting indicates this sample is slated for advanced forensic scrutiny, requiring protocols more sophisticated than standard lab testing. This involves the capabilities of the FBI lab at Quantico, using specialized technology that the private Florida facility lacked. The terminology reflects official bureau vernacular, focusing on cutting-edge techniques and specialized methods used to probe biological evidence. These protocols are engineered to extract genetic data from samples that traditional processes would otherwise destroy. Whether analysts are using investigative genetic genealogy or a proprietary extraction platform remains unclear, as the Bureau has not detailed the hardware. Despite the lack of clarity regarding the exact science, the hair is now held by the agency with the broadest forensic arsenal. However, this evidentiary handoff reveals a palpable friction within the investigative hierarchy, as there is tension inside this pipeline. Initial reporting from Reuters, later corroborated by Fox News Digital, detailed a period of significant logistical conflict between local and federal agents. At the heart of the disagreement was a tug-of-war over which specific laboratory would perform the testing on the physical evidence. Records suggest the Federal Bureau of Investigation formally requested the glove and the DNA recovered from the home from Sheriff Nanos. The Bureau intended to process these items in Virginia, yet the sheriff reportedly stood his ground, favoring the private lab in Florida. One source told Fox News Digital that federal intervention was inevitable, since the Bureau would likely retest the materials anyway. Time is a vanishing commodity in a disappearance like this, and the Bureau argued their methods could yield results without sacrificing the sample's integrity. On April 16th, the Sheriff's Department issued a statement on X, attempting to neutralize that narrative of internal conflict. They maintained that a collaborative relationship with federal partners had existed since day one, dismissing the reports of friction as old news. According to the department, the private Florida laboratory remains in active communication with the Bureau and other forensic partners. The official line remains consistent. DNA analysis is an ongoing process with results for the case still pending. It is entirely possible that both narratives coexist. The FBI can hold the hair sample while the local office maintains its stance. There could have been a sharp disagreement regarding the processing of the primary evidence while still maintaining a working relationship. While the Sheriff's Department might be cooperating now, federal investigators likely view the timeline of that cooperation as being delayed. Transporting that hair sample to Quantico does not signal an imminent resolution to the case. This is a high-stakes forensic gamble, an advanced examination, with absolutely no promise of a usable genetic result. Even so, this represents the most significant movement the forensic side of the investigation has seen in weeks. This update acted as the steady foundation beneath the more explosive headlines that dominated the end of the week. During the Friday broadcast of Crime Stories with Nancy Grace, Dave Mack broke down the timeline of events for his audience. He highlighted the grim milestone of 76 days since the disappearance began. Mack addressed rumors circulating that a suspect had finally been detained, suggesting the public was being steered toward a possible breakthrough. Fresh data is surfacing, but we are now 2 months deep with an overwhelming volume of information to sift through. Some DNA results have finally trickled in, yet the investigation appears to be circling back to its starting point. The public podcast description identifies the victim as 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, the mother of Savannah Guthrie, missing 76 days. The episode notes confirm that the show is receiving tips indicating a person may have been detained in this case. That specific phrasing, hearing someone may have been detained, suggests an unverified tip moving through media circles rather than a confirmed arrest. On the air, Max scrutinized a strange moment from the Wednesday broadcast involving Savannah Guthrie and her sudden departure. He noted the teased interview that never happened, followed by an abrupt handoff to Hoda Kotb without explanation from the network. In his view, that sudden professional departure should be analyzed in conjunction with the rumors of a break. Nancy Grace pushed the theory further, suggesting a coded notification to Savannah would have signaled a recovery or a death. Because Savannah eventually returned to finish the show, Grace argued that the alert was likely not about finding her mother. This implies that if a notification occurred, it concerned something else, perhaps the detention Dave Mack reported south of Tucson. It could point to a suspect being taken into custody. Specifically, the detention Dave Mack reported south of Tucson. At this stage, however, we are looking at on-air speculation and commentary rather than verified police facts. While the analysis creates a compelling story for the listeners, it does not substitute for hard evidence from investigators. Any real progress must be verified by law enforcement, and by Friday evening, officials had remained silent. Neither the Pima County Sheriff's Department nor the FBI had confirmed an arrest, and no booking photos were released. The entire framework of the story, as the public consumed it, was built upon a foundation of unconfirmed reports. Anonymous leads and live speculation regarding that Wednesday morning Today Show segment highlight exactly how information travels through the true crime circuit in the late 2020s, where a high-profile host mentions hearing reports of a major break. Listeners, having waited 10 weeks for progress, quickly invent the specific details that the host carefully omitted from the segment. Secondary accounts amplify the noise while automated sites pull the social media data to generate blog posts. Meanwhile, the original anchor has pivoted to the next file on the morning schedule, leaving the claim to evolve on third-party platforms. This past Friday, that digital evolution triggered the exact type of scenario that makes this investigation such a critical case study. As the story gained traction and view counts surged with comment sections screaming, finally a glaring clinical void sat right at the center. Specifically, not a single person could provide a name for this alleged detainee. Zero identification of the arresting agency existed. No location, no timeline, and not one verified source within the ranks of law enforcement. The entire narrative was built on a host describing an anonymous tip fueled by a panel guessing how it fit elsewhere. They were connecting those dots to a random television moment from 2 days prior, following a pattern so predictable it was painful. Long-term observers tracking this since February recognized the structural arc of the lie before the first inquiry was even typed out. Michael Ruiz, reporting for Fox News Digital, went straight to Sheriff Chris Nanos this Friday morning. His inquiry was blunt. Had a fresh person of interest been taken into custody overnight regarding the Nancy Guthrie homicide? The response was a single, curt word: nope. Ruiz shared that denial on X, and the massive wave of speculation immediately broke. One screenshot effectively ended the frenzy. Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, a fixture in this case's coverage, added her own confirmation. Writing directly on X, she stated that Sheriff Nanos had confirmed no one was actually detained the night before in Nancy's case. Despite the social media firestorm, Yahoo News verified the denial, followed quickly by TV Insider, Parade, and IB Times UK. Yahoo News verified the lack of an arrest, as did TV Insider, Parade, and even the International Business Times UK. Within 12 hours of the Crime Stories segment, every major news aggregator had pivoted to the same blunt report. Nanos didn't bother with a formal press conference to kill the noise. He gave a one-word answer and went back to work. Over the last 10 weeks, Sheriff Nanos has hardly been shy, appearing at numerous press briefings and speaking with the media. He has routinely engaged local Tucson outlets, answering for his department's investigative tactics and their level of cooperation with the FBI. He has specifically addressed his controversial choice to utilize a private Florida lab for forensic testing rather than federal facilities. This includes his preference for a Florida-based laboratory over the FBI's own facilities for processing certain pieces of physical evidence. During a local interview late this past March, he aggressively defended the initial crime scene processing, stating he harbored zero regrets. He stood by his team's efforts, dismissing the claims that the scene was cleared too early by calling those accusations silly. Nanos isn't some wallflower. He is a vocal administrator whose public statements have provided the most contentious moments of this entire saga. Contextually, a one-word rebuttal from Chris Nanos carries more weight than it appears. Nope offers zero room for further discussion. It represents the most efficient possible termination of a false narrative. More importantly, its clinical brevity hides what it omitted. He didn't clarify that someone was picked up and released without charges, nor did he mention a voluntary interview that didn't lead to arrest. There was no mention of an investigated tip that turned out to be a dead end. He simply said, nope. He provided no description of a lead that was followed and then discarded. He uttered a single, nope. Officially, that one word suggests the sheriff's department had absolutely nothing to look into or disprove to begin with. The lingering question for this community remains, if no detention occurred, where did that initial tip actually originate? Investigative paths at crime stories operate like any other reporters, via phone calls, digital tips, or through anonymous contacts. Information flows via phone, email, or middlemen. Even a lead reaching a national broadcast isn't necessarily a calculated fabrication. However, accuracy is never guaranteed. This Friday's noise might have been a misinterpretation of a separate police operation in southern Arizona. It could have been a plant intended to stir the media, or perhaps a legitimate lead that vanished into thin air. Perhaps someone was manufacturing a news cycle, or a real lead dissolved between the initial tip and the actual broadcast. None of those theories have been resolved for the public, but the sheriff's blunt answer confirmed no new person was detained. What remains a matter of public record is this. By Friday, no additional suspect had been taken into custody. The FBI has remained silent, announcing neither a person of interest nor a formal arrest in the Guthrie murder. The Pima County Sheriff's Department also remains silent while the recovered hair sample sits with technicians in the federal laboratory. That mixed DNA profile is still technically overwhelming, and the masked figure captured on the doorbell camera remains a total enigma. 78 days after Nancy Guthrie vanished, she is still missing. That Friday rumor caught fire for a specific reason. It resonated because this specific sequence had already played out in the public eye, largely because the local community had seen this exact script play out twice before. The community witnessed it twice within the first 14 days of the investigation. One event took place south of Tucson. This mirrored the direction of the recent rumor, while the second event happened only 2 miles from Guthrie's home. New locations, same results. Rewind to Tuesday, February 10th. The FBI finally went public with the initial evidence. They shared high-resolution photos and video recovered from the Nest camera at the Guthrie residence. One image captured a figure. It was a masked male on the porch during the pre-dawn hours of February 1st. He carried a black backpack. His movements suggested he was actively trying to disable the security device. This provided the public's first look at the man. Within hours of that release, news broke of a traffic stop south of Tucson where a male had been detained. The Pima County Sheriff confirmed via X that they were questioning a subject regarding the disappearance. National media, including CNN, reported the detention occurred in Rio Rico, a border community roughly 60 miles south of Tucson. After a local property search, the public, which had been desperate for a person of interest for 9 days, began to speculate. They fell into the same cycle we saw in April, fueled by hopeful social media posts and frantic online chatter. Every feed was buried under those 3 letters: POI, typed in all caps across every single repost and comment thread. This detention ultimately fizzled out, mirroring the collapse of the April rumor. The subject was eventually let go. After several hours, the man stood outside his Rio Rico home and gave an interview to Telemundo in Spanish. He identified himself as Carlos Palazuelos. He worked as a delivery driver and denied knowing who Nancy Guthrie even was. He maintained he had no hand in any abduction. His mother-in-law had already defended his innocence on CNN the night before. She insisted her son-in-law was uninvolved. By February 11th, the Pima County Sheriff's Department officially confirmed his release. They stated the male, picked up during a follow-up on specific leads, was no longer in their custody. No charges were filed. He was never labeled a suspect. The search ended, and the public moved on for the moment. Jump forward 72 hours. Late on Friday, February 13th, the Sheriff's Department announced a fresh operation. They were descending on a residence in the Catalina foothills. Law enforcement flooded the neighborhood under the cover of night. This wasn't some distant border town. The scene was only 2 miles from where Nancy Guthrie had actually disappeared. SWAT teams, mobile crime labs, and agents from the FBI and local police departments converged on the Shadow Hills neighborhood. Witnesses reported seeing 3 people taken into custody. A man and a woman were removed directly from the house. A third detention occurred nearby during a traffic stop. Simultaneously, FBI agents surrounded a Culver's restaurant parking lot. They targeted a gray Range Rover. Forensic teams photographed the SUV before it was tarped and hauled away for analysis. By dawn, the media had everything they needed: a SWAT raid, multiple detentions, and a towed luxury vehicle. The drama of a seized car at a family restaurant had the whole town leaning in, waiting for an answer. Within hours, the momentum stalled again. No arrests were made, and no one remained in custody for the Guthrie case. News outlets eventually identified Luke Daly as one of the individuals caught up in that February 13th sweep. His lawyer, Chris Scipio, went on the record to clarify his client's involvement in the search warrant execution. Scipio confirmed that both Daly and his mother were detained while investigators served 2 separate warrants at the property. Both were released shortly after, with no charges pending. Scipio was firm. There was no connection to the missing woman. To date, no one from the Rio Rico stop or the Catalina Foothills raid has been named as a suspect. Not the driver in the Culver's lot, nor the residents in the foothills have been officially linked to her disappearance. This is the established rhythm of the case: detain, release, repeat. 2 false starts occurred in the first 2 weeks. By April, a third attempt surfaced via rumors of another detention south of town. The sheriff killed it in hours. A one-word denial ended the speculation. 3 times this has happened. 3 times the town held its collective breath. And 3 times the air went out of the room. Despite the noise, the official score sheet remains at 0. No arrests, no suspects, no motive found. Nancy Guthrie is still gone. When the latest rumor died, the discourse shifted. Platforms like X and various true crime sites saw a familiar transition as the initial wave of frantic optimism vanished. Users who had begged for a resolution pivoted back to the grim reality that has defined this investigation for many weeks. They are forced to take stock of what they actually have, which is nothing but a cold trail and unanswered questions. Following a comprehensive forensic review of the doorbell footage, the Federal Bureau of Investigation officially identified the unknown subject as a male. He is described as having a medium build and standing between 5 feet 9 and 5 feet 10 inches, his face obscured by a mask and hands covered by gloves. The suspect carried a 25-liter black Ozark Trail hiker pack, a specific backpack model sold at Walmart locations across the country. Reports indicate the man was seen holding what appeared to be a high-intensity flashlight gripped firmly between his teeth. According to an analyst BIA agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, this tactic allowed him to keep both hands free to tamper with the areas surrounding the security camera. His movements captured on film suggest a dual-task approach, potentially attempting to force the door with his left hand while simultaneously knocking with his right. Coffindaffer also proposed a secondary theory, though she admitted it was a stretch, suggesting the possible involvement of another individual. She floated the idea that an accomplice might have been positioned inside the residence while the masked figure stood on the porch, though she stopped short of a definitive conclusion. It was presented as a viable lead. Meanwhile, investigators are currently working with a complex cluster of recovered DNA evidence. This biological profile has yet to name a suspect, and the DNA found on a glove 2 miles away was eventually traced back to a local worker. That DNA belonged to a restaurant employee with no ties to the disappearance, while mixed samples inside the house have proven too complicated for standard deconvolution software. A hair sample remains in federal custody, and the FBI is still conducting a detailed analysis as of this current broadcast. Genetic genealogist C.C. Moore, a specialist with Parabon Nanolabs, has been instrumental in solving high-profile cold cases through advanced investigative identification. With a decade of experience across the United States, Moore told NewsNation that biological evidence like DNA is remarkably resilient. She maintains that the crime scene may still hold viable DNA, pointing specifically to the moment the subject held the flashlight in his mouth. Saliva represents a critical category of biological material that forensic experts are trained to recover via swabbing if it touched the camera. If any saliva was transferred to the camera housing, the surrounding shrubs, or any other adjacent surface, it could finally provide the specific genetic profile this investigation requires. Moore remains convinced that the subject's saliva is the most probable source for obtaining the necessary investigative DNA profile. However, she admitted that in a residence like Nancy Guthrie's, determining the most effective starting point for evidence collection is a significant challenge. Beyond the forensics, a family continues to demand answers, as Savannah Guthrie has officially returned to her professional duties. She resumed her seat at the Today anchor desk on April 6th, telling the public that it felt good to be home. Her yellow dress served as a silent tribute to the yellow flowers left by mourners at her mother's residence in the Catalina foothills. Savannah's siblings, Cameron and Annie Guthrie, are utilizing social media videos to ensure the search for their mother remains at the forefront of public attention. On February 24th, the family announced a reward of up to $1 million for any information leading to Nancy's recovery. When added to the FBI's $100,000 offer, the total incentive for information stands at $1.2 million. Savannah later specified on Instagram that the reward is payable in cash and that individuals providing anonymous tips remain fully eligible for the payout. The family has essentially removed every bureaucratic obstacle that might prevent a witness from coming forward. What remains is the Sheriff's Department's own internal timeline and the official procedural log of the ongoing investigation. This log includes extensive neighborhood canvassing and a formal request issued to all residents living within 2 miles of the Catalina Foothills home. Homeowners were urged to audit their security footage from January 1st through February 2nd for any suspicious activity or notable events. This massive joint operation involved the FBI, Customs and Border Protection, and specialized search and rescue units working in tandem. Investigators confirmed Nancy was dropped off at her residence by her son-in-law at 9:50 p.m. on the evening of January 31st. Relatives went to check on her the following morning when she failed to log on for a scheduled church service being live-streamed online. Upon arrival, they found her phone and personal items still inside, but discovered Nancy's blood on the porch, confirmed through forensic testing. Nancy is classified as a high-risk, vulnerable adult due to her advanced age, physical mobility issues, and her critical need for daily medication. The urgency regarding her medical requirements has served as a primary driver for the timeline of this investigation since day one. At the center of it all lies the core question that a recent wave of rumors failed to resolve. Who is the man caught on the doorbell camera? Until he is identified, every police stop south of Tucson becomes a high-stakes event. Every DNA sample, every local government vote, and every brief statement from the sheriff adds another layer of pressure to this unsolved case. The central mystery is unchanged, and Chris Nanos is facing a high-tension 78th day as the lead on the Nancy Guthrie case. This intense scrutiny forms the backdrop for the one-word response the sheriff gave to reporter Michael Ruiz this past Friday. The internal conflict began with the deputies. On March 24th, the Pima County Deputies Organization held a formal vote. Representing over 300 active deputies, the union known by the acronym PCDO serves as the primary collective voice for the department's rank and file. The membership cast a vote of no confidence against Sheriff Nanos, with reports indicating 241 members supported the measure. This no-confidence resolution passed decisively within the rank and file, with exactly 241 deputies voting to formalize their lack of faith in Nanos's leadership. The board recorded 65 abstentions and exactly 0 votes in favor of the option for the sheriff to remain in his position. Not one deputy who actually cast a ballot chose to side with him, and the union immediately issued a formal demand for his resignation. Union President Aaron Cross stated publicly that the residents of Pima County must be aware that their top official is being untruthful. This accusation involves statements made under oath, and the legal friction between Cross and Nanos actually predates the Nancy Guthrie case. The specific deposition at the center of this controversy was recorded in December of 2025, months before Guthrie was abducted. That testimony created a secondary pressure point that intensified in March when the Arizona Republic exposed deep contradictions in the sheriff's history. Reporters uncovered significant discrepancies between the sheriff's public resume, his sworn 2025 testimony, and his original internal affairs files. Those records track back to the El Paso Police Department, the specific agency where Nanos first launched his law enforcement career. According to reporting corroborated by major outlets like The Hollywood Reporter and Newsweek, Nanos's resume claimed a 1984 departure date. However, internal police records tell a different story, documenting a resignation in lieu of termination in August of 1982. That is a 2-year gap that hides a troubled history involving 8 separate suspensions from duty throughout his tenure in El Paso. His disciplinary file shows between 34 and 37 days of unpaid leave for a variety of serious professional and ethical violations. The documented incidents include an unauthorized shot fired, off-duty gambling, chronic tardiness, refusing to follow orders, and the use of excessive force. During a December 2025 deposition, Nanos was asked a direct question. Had he ever been disciplined at the suspension level? He answered no. Yet the El Paso records, as reported by multiple investigative journalists, clearly document 8 distinct suspensions from his time there. A spokesperson for the Sheriff's Department attempted to characterize the resume discrepancies as nothing more than simple clerical errors. Nanos has defended his record by pointing to more than 40 years of service and framing his tenure as one of accountability. He describes his career as being rooted in the protection of residents, but the Board of Supervisors did not accept his explanation. The board refused to view the investigative reporting as a closed matter and moved to escalate their inquiry on March 24th. They instructed their legal counsel to draft requirements that would force Nanos to provide specific reports to the board while under oath. On April 7th, the board voted unanimously to invoke Arizona Revised Statute 11-253 to compel his testimony. This territorial-era law gives the board the power to force county employees to answer for the performance of their official duties. According to reporting, this specific law includes a provision that makes non-compliance a potential legal pathway for removal from office. If the sheriff refuses to comply, the board has the legal authority to initiate the process of removing him from his position. In the following days, the board delivered 4 precise questions to Nanos, giving him exactly 10 business days to provide a response. That deadline expires on April 21st, the same day as the board's next meeting, where they will examine his El Paso history. The inquiries focus on his past claims about his employment, his disciplinary record, and his recent actions against a political opponent. They are specifically questioning his treatment of former Lieutenant Heather Lappin, as well as his department's budget overruns and federal coordination. Vice Chair Matt Hines has made it clear that Nanos must provide a substantive response to every question posed by the board. Hines stated that the county expects a full accounting of these issues, leaving no room for the sheriff to dodge the investigation. Beyond the board's legal pressure, a formal recall effort has been launched by Republican congressional candidate Daniel Gutierrez. Gutierrez initiated the recall in March, telling the media that the sheriff's handling of the Guthrie case was a massive embarrassment. He cited the abduction case as a failure and noted that the reporting on Nanos's work history compelled him to act. While the recall effort is active, reporting suggests it is a long shot due to the high procedural barriers in Arizona law. This pressure is mounting alongside the fallout from the 2024 election, which Nanos won by a very narrow margin. He kept his seat by fewer than 500 votes against Heather Lappin, who was suspended from her job before the election. Lappin was removed from duty weeks before the vote, and a subsequent independent review confirmed that Nanos misused department resources. The review found that Nanos sought political gain by using his office against his rival, a detail the board is now examining. This pattern of misconduct has fed into a broader institutional crisis that is currently being scrutinized by the Pima County supervisors. Lappin has filed a federal lawsuit against the sheriff, creating a parallel track of legal jeopardy that will continue regardless of his status. This litigation exists alongside an ACLU lawsuit that alleges deputies were illegally coordinating with federal Border Patrol agents. This adds yet another complex case to the department's legal docket, further complicating the sheriff's position within the county government. None of these civil matters have been settled yet, and the investigative reporting has not been proven in a criminal court. However, the sheriff's testimony regarding his prior suspensions is now the specific subject of a formal perjury review. The Board of Supervisors is reportedly pressuring the Arizona Attorney General to refer the case to the Department of Justice, though Nanos has maintained his defense. He took issue with the portrayal of his professional history. Meanwhile, his department issued formal defenses regarding the Guthrie case through various public announcements. Both law enforcement and legal counsel rely on one specific term during evidence discussions: silence. It represents more than a void. It constitutes a formal category. Witness omissions, details scrubbed from files, or data points left unverified by agencies. These gaps form silhouettes within the official record, and these silhouettes carry weight. When a sheriff gives a one-word answer to a prominent reporter during a national probe, it creates a specific profile. Tracing its edges reveals intelligence that the public typically misses. A sheriff who held a suspect in custody during the 7 and Wenher San, a major investigation, would almost never address a direct inquiry from the press with a blunt nope. Standard procedure dictates he either cite the ongoing probe or offer a highly controlled confirmation of the arrest following strict agency protocols. Nope doesn't function as a refusal to speak. It is a dismissal. A sheriff lacking a suspect, yet pursuing a lead or preparing for a scheduled interview with a warrant pending or a specific target under surveillance would also, in nearly every scenario, avoid that four-letter word. He might refuse to speak or note the case remains active. He would not shut the door on a custody question if an arrest was currently being prepared. Institutional caution forbids it. Nope is the silhouette of a door slammed shut. A sheriff who realizes there are zero leads in that direction and whose team has failed to identify a suspect in the 76 days since the abduction can use that word without professional risk. It is low cost and technically accurate if the answer is no. For those observing closely, that word serves as an admission that the probe sits exactly where the evidence suggests rather than where the public hopes. This explains why that nope has outlived the original rumor in news cycles. That rumor lasted less than 24 hours. Yet, the sheriff's blunt response has dominated the news for the entire weekend. It became the headline for every major aggregator. 20 years from now, if this case finally reaches a resolution, it will remain the one-word milestone for that Friday in April when the community was briefly and wrongly optimistic. The sheriff is not responsible. He did not invent the rumor, nor did he script the mid-show handoff on Today. He didn't leak that tip to the crime broadcast. He simply gave an answer. That answer dismantled the hopeful narrative the community constructed while waiting for institutional transparency. Ending that narrative after 78 days of uncertainty is a quiet, heavy reality for everyone involved. Every time a false narrative dies, the scope narrows. Each narrowing is an admission that the actual truth has not surfaced. Within the next 48 to 72 hours after this broadcast, a sudden arrest remains realistically impossible. The FBI laboratory does not provide hair sample findings the same week the evidence arrives. The Pima County Board of Supervisors will convene on April 21st. This session will publicly expose whatever data Nanos provides. He must address the 4 specific inquiries issued following the Nanos provides. And at a very April 7th vote. This response will dictate the tone for future institutional pressure on the Sheriff's Department. The board must decide if his answers are substantive or if they require further legal steps under Arizona Revised Statute 11253. This could either accelerate or stall the recall depending on his provided details. Beneath this political layer, the core criminal investigation continues. FBI analysts are still processing the hair sample. The mixed DNA profiles found inside the residence remains the primary hurdle for detectives. Investigative genetic genealogy, the method that caught the Golden State Killer and cracked numerous cold cases, requires a profile clean enough to construct a functional family tree. C.C. Moore's recent statements mirror the concerns forensic analysts have voiced since the beginning. If usable saliva or an extractable profile exists, and if the FBI succeeds where Florida failed, then that profile hits the genealogical databases. Suddenly, the man caught on the doorbell camera finally has a name. Until that breakthrough occurs, the community stays in its 78-day pattern. It watches and waits. It relies strictly on verified reporting while ignoring any unvetted tips. Residents are keeping their composure despite the Friday rumors and those cryptic, one-word responses. If you are following this investigation closely and want the latest developments the moment they appear, please subscribe. The next update might come from a court filing or an FBI press release. We will be watching. 78 days. That is how long this community has practiced its disciplined ritual of observation, patience, and consumption of verified forensic reporting. They ignore anonymous tips, maintaining clinical composure through the cycle of Friday rumors and those sterile single-word responses from law enforcement. Precision matters. If you have monitored this case surgically and require the next update the instant it surfaces, subscribing to this channel is your priority. Anticipate the evolution. It could arrive as a detailed court filing or perhaps a formal press release from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Finality. That resolution might manifest as a formal Pima County Board of Supervisors vote or a single word carrying immense contextual weight, just like the last one. Once that moment arrives, this coverage will proceed with a clinical focus on attribution and factual integrity. We maintain a strict level of respect for those still living while pursuing the closure this audience has long anticipated. If you possess knowledge regarding the current location of Nancy Guthrie, immediately notify the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or contact the Pima County Sheriff Department at 520-35149. Combined reward funds total $1.2 million. Payments can be cash-based and anonymity is protected. This broadcast serves as a systematic investigative review of public documents regarding the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. No segment of this program asserts criminal liability against any named but every individual cited, including those previously taken into custody and subsequently set free, must be legally presumed innocent. All assertions are credited to the primary news organizations that originally published them, ensuring rigorous standards of reporting accountability. Sources include Fox News Digital, Yahoo News, and the Associated Press, along with CNN, CBS News, NBC News, and The New York Times, Newsweek, and The Hollywood Reporter, plus the Arizona Republic, Luminaria, Arizona Public Media, and Parade. TV Insider, News Nation, and Pima County Sheriff's social media updates. Critical developments may have occurred after this recording was finalized. Anyone holding credible information on the whereabouts of Nancy Guthrie should reach out to the FBI at 1-800-CALL. The FBI, or call the Pima County Sheriff Department directly at 5203-5149.